Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk. Today we have a special guest on the show today, Mr. General Flynn. General Flynn, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm cracking up because, I get introduced as all kinds of things. That's the first time somebody ever introduced me as Mr. General, which is pretty cool, actually. I like that.
So, General, tell us a little bit about your background. I think everybody's familiar with you, but I was telling you right
Yeah,
before we got on the show, I'm right here beside Fort Benning, and I know the veterans is a big issue with you. Can you tell everybody a little bit
yeah.
about your background?
So my background, I am one of 9 children. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family. My father is a World War II and Korea War vet, and he retired from the Army as a sergeant. And my mother, but both my parents are deceased. My mother was a terrific lady, smart as a whip, little tiny, like a little tiny woman too, but tough as nails. And I was in the middle, roughly in the middle of 9, right? And I was actually born on an Army base. I lived as a young child over in Germany. My father was a military police instructor at the time in a joint German U.S. military, U.S. Army school in a little town called Oberammergau. I learned how to snow ski and ice skate, and actually played hockey when I was about 3 or 4 years old on a lake for any of the vets that listen to this that that ever spent any time in Germany in the South on a lake called Lake Kimsey. And anyway, we finally, when my father retired, he retired back in his and my mom's hometown, which is really Middletown, Newport, Rhode Island, up in New England, up in the southern part of New England, in a little tiny house. And he went to work as a teller for a while. My mother just took care of us at home, a teller in a bank. And then then he got into like repossessing cars. But then my mom, she was, like I said, she's smart as a whip. She ended up getting into like teaching secretaries how to type and stuff like that. So we had a really, really great growing up as a very tight knit family in our family. And when we moved back to Rhode Island after my father retired from the Army, I got into surfing. And people think of Rhode Island, when you think of surfers, you think of California,
Yeah.
or maybe or Hawaii or Australia or maybe Florida. But some of the best surf in the world is actually in the state of Rhode Island, because we have a very, very rocky coast that jets out right into the Atlantic. And like the latest Hurricane Henry, came through, and we had waves at 8 to 10 feet. Beautiful, beautiful lefts and rights. So
Wow.
any of your audience that knows surfing, or if you ever watch surfing, I've been surfing for over 50 years. I own more fishing poles than I do surfboards, but I own 7 surfboards that I've accumulated over the years. And so that is my safe space, is going out in the ocean when nobody can bother you and you're on your own, and you have to, you sort of compete against yourself in waves and in the ocean, which is very powerful. The other thing that I think is of interest for some people, maybe not everybody, but my family, we grew up as Democrats. So if you're, from political things, because obviously my last 4 or 5 years have been, on the political theater, right? Political persecution. But we actually grew up as Democrats. I never changed parties. I finally changed parties because when I went and we had to move into a new home. And when we did, we had to ask us where we registered. We registered actually for our licenses. So I said, yeah, I'll register as a Republican this time. But when I ran alongside of Donald Trump years ago, and he was considering me as a potential vice president, I was in the final 4 of the group that he was considering. I was a Democrat at the time. I was a registered Democrat. I went into the White House with him as a Democrat. And that's a funny story that maybe in the future we'll come back and I'll talk to you about that specific story and some of the times that I had with President Trump. But so growing up, I always knew, because I was at the age where I could hang around with my father as a young kid. My father, like I said, he retired as a sergeant. My father was a non-commissioned officer, so he did a lot of things around the bases, and he was a very, very good athlete himself. And so I grew up in athletics, but I grew up around the military base and military bases. So I liked that lifestyle. I liked what I saw. And I think from the time that I can remember, I always felt like I was going to go into the military. I never really knew whether it was going to be the Army or whatever service. I ended up going into the Army. I was very serious about going into the Marine Corps in my freshman, after my, sort of in the middle of my freshman year of college, because I wasn't doing too good in college because I played too much basketball and did too many other things, and then batten down on my school and stuff like that. But one of the guys that I played basketball with my freshman year, because I did actually enlist in the Marine Corps on a delayed entry, and that summer, one of the guys I played basketball with was an ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps major, who was a pretty good basketball player. And he came and found me in my hometown and said, "Hey, I've got a scholarship, a 3-year ROTC scholarship, Army scholarship that I can get you if you'll take it. The only condition is you got to batten down, and you've got to get your grades up, and you got to stick to, the grind here." And so, long story short, I took it. I said, "Really?" And I was getting ready to go in the Marines. That got all taken care of because I was still staying in the service. So that, that's another story for another day. But bottom line is, I took that ROTC scholarship. And the funny thing about that, or the interesting thing about it, is I did not know this until then, and I learned about it even more so in my days in the military, because I helped others do it later on in life in my military days. But a lot of kids, a lot of scholarships are out there for young people, men and women, that get turned in because nobody ever applies for them or nobody takes them, particularly from the government and from the military, in this case, the military. So what I learned was that there were 7 full scholarships turned in. And this guy knew me because, we got along on the basketball court, and he saw something in me. And this was at the State University. So I was attending the University of Rhode Island. I'm really a product of, for the most part, public school education, Quidnick School, Middletown School, junior high, Middletown High School. And I went to my state university, which was about a 20-minute drive, And so he saw something in me, and he said, "No, you need to take this." And so I did. And so I did. And roughly 35, 37 years later, I retired as out of the Army as the most senior military intelligence officer in the Army, head of one of the largest intelligence agencies in the world, and a 3-star general, and not being a West Pointer and not being a Ivy League guy, or and I credit that. I credit my success in the military to really the people that, I credit it to my mom and my dad. My father was tough guy, treat others like you want to be treated type guy, golden rule, right? That's the golden rule. Treat others like you like to be treated. And my mother was always about lifelong learning. Don't ever, you go get that education. I don't care what you do with it. You can put it in your back pocket if you want, but you're going to get it. And so that's been my whole thing. And I continue to educate myself. I printed off about 5 articles this morning, not about your show, but just about other things to keep my mind fresh and what I'm about these days, So anyway, so I absolutely loved being in the military. The military is all about the people. It's all about teamwork. I think that the people that I work with, all all the way through my career. From the time my first real assignment after some schooling and all that was the 82nd Airborne Division. And I thank God that was my first assignment, because the 82nd Airborne Division out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I ended up spending almost 17 years of my career there. In the 82nd and in the 18th Airborne Corps, and then in Special Operations Forces, and of course, the reason why I say I'm blessed to have served at the 82nd or Fort Bragg, because Fort Bragg is when the nation has an emergency, just like you have an emergency at your house, you dial 911. When the nation has an emergency, they dial 911, and that phone rings at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And as we sit here today, the unit that's on the airfield over in Kabul, Afghanistan, came out of the 82nd Airborne Division because it was an emergency. They needed the best, most deployable unit in the world to get there fast, and that's the 82nd. So they put a better part of a brigade plus some other leadership there on the ground, and let's hope that they're given the realm of things that they can do by our political masters. And obviously everybody sees different things happening there today. So anyway, for me, it was always about service. And because I think that's what I learned as a child. And in the early days of all the things that I did, sports primarily, because I really enjoyed a lot of sports, and I was decent. I was a good high school athlete. When I get into college, it's a little bit different capability. But anyway, and then surfing was, like I said, always my life. So the one thing that I would say to you guys, to you, Eric and Melissa, and what we're talking about today is really, I think the word that comes to mind about dad talk today, to me, is loyalty. Loyalty. And why I talk about loyalty. And this is what I counsel people on that I think that have difficulties in relationships and with children and in life. A lot of veterans out there struggle. A lot of people struggle out there. And this is not a woe is me thing at all. I mean, I always tell everybody this. My wife and I, we've known each other, really been together since we were 13 years old. We've been married for over 40 years. That's why I use the word loyalty. And what I always say about that is that loyalty, it's a two-way street. It requires a deeper sense of friendship as you go forward, particularly in a relationship. And like I like to use the phrase, you have to like the one that you love, right? You have to like the one that you love. And so, but not everything happens perfectly for people, especially early on in life, right? And you fall into these relationships, you fall out of these relationships. I actually think that, and I'll stop here in a second because I know you want to talk about some other things too, but I actually think that, and maybe it's my frame of mind or what I was taught about things in life, and everything requires work and sacrifice. Nothing should ever be handed to you, because if it's just handed to you, then you take it for granted, and you abuse that. You abuse that, whatever that is, right? And so I think what sometimes people aren't willing to work at things. It doesn't mean that everything's going to work out. It just means that you really do have to get up every morning, and do the things that you need to do to be able to not just be able to put bread on the table, but also to take care of the various relationships that you have and the friendships that you have, because it's not always about a marriage that produces children, because I do want to talk about children a little bit here. I think that and the other side, I think for this idea of loyalty, it's loyalty to sort of a greater cause in one's life. And I do find that faith has actually become even more increased in my life. You know, we were raised as Irish in an Irish Catholic family. You know, and Catholics are kind of a funny group of people. You know, but we kneel down and we stand up. We kneel down, we stand up in church all day long. But what I would say is that you find faith when you go through really, really difficult times, because freedom is not something that we take it for granted, but it's not the most important thing in your life, right? Freedom in a relationship, freedom from a relationship, freedom and the freedoms that we have. The most important thing in life is actually faith. And the most important part of faith is faith in yourself, right? First, faith in yourself first. And if you don't have faith in yourself, then you cannot have faith in anybody else, right? Like I
100%.
Yeah, I have learned that. I've learned that in spades. And because people always come up to me and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry for what happened to you." And I tell people, don't feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for myself. I know who I am. I will define myself, and I won't let others define me. They can say what they want about me, but it doesn't matter, because I know who I am. And certainly my wife knows who I am, and we're very, very close. But you have to have faith in yourself first, and then you can have faith in others. And that includes your own. That includes children. It includes your children and of course any friends or others that you have in your life. Right?
Yeah,
you got to have faith in yourself first.
Yes, General Flynn, I completely agree with you. I like the military culture. I think, you know, when I was active duty, I loved the camaraderie, and I loved just being a part of the United States Army. You know, I loved being part of that group. You know, but it seems like, especially within the last 10 years, things are changing. There's a lot of social policies, and you look at the Military Times back in June published an article that said that, you know, reported that there's 4 times as many troops and vets that have died by suicide than in combat since 9/11. So, and it seems the Army is always implementing new policies. We're always going, you know, so much training. I know you've heard the term death by PowerPoint. So where we go to so much stuff, but yet I wonder, is it really working? And in that, you know, I have a lot of soldiers that come to my private practice and they say, you know, my spouse knows, look, I'll just make an allegation, I'll ruin your career. So when we look at soldier welfare in terms of the family within the military, do you think that a lot of these programs are actually facilitating keeping families together, or are we coming down hard on our soldiers for allegations before they're even proven?
Yeah. So let me just say one thing about the military, okay, and why we have a military, why we have a Navy. And then, as our Constitution says, and then why we, in time of war, we build a army. Okay, the Constitution doesn't talk about the Marine Corps, doesn't talk about the Air Force, doesn't talk about the Coast Guard. It talks about a Navy specifically, and it talks about building an army during a time of war. So, the purpose of a military, before I really get into your question, the purpose of our military is to fight and win our nation's wars, period. So you know, we apply the military instrument of power to fight and win our nation's wars, to defend us against, you know, for the most part, external foes who want to steal our way of life from us. And so we build a capability called the United States Armed Forces to fight, defeat, or destroy if necessary, but ultimately to win. And then we try to help those nations if they want the help, right? Like the Marshall Plan after World War II is an example. It's a great example of how we helped rebuild Europe. You know, and then there's also other great examples. But what we have done is we have gotten really good at participating in wars, frankly, since World War II, and we don't win anymore. So, and part of why that is, and now I'm getting to the essence of your question, we have turned our military into a social experiment. for all kinds of things. You know, I mean, talk about death by PowerPoint, or just this socialization. Because and frankly, why we have done that is because we can, because our nation actually can use the military as a tool of social experimentation based on the whims of the commander-in-chief or the people that are around the commander-in-chief. You know, I mean, I came into the military in the late 70s when we were coming out of Vietnam. I mean, people were like telling me, why are you going in the military? And I already kind of explained that because I wanted to serve. And at that time, it was all about drugs coming out of Vietnam. I mean, the drug problem in the military was just horrendous. And hell, they used to call the 82nd Airborne the jumping junkies. You know, when I first went to Fort Bragg, you know, that was the sort of the moniker. And then fast forward to the 90s, we, you know, the whole thing about don't ask, don't tell, right? Don't ask, don't tell. Another socialization and a social experiment, because if we can do it in the military, then we can do it in the rest of society, right? Then we can you know, take these social experiments, and now we have this, you know, I'll just, you know, throw out the one example, but in this new sort of day and age, we have this critical race theory. So all of this socialization of our military, it confuses those men and women who decide to join the military and sign on that line at some recruiter's office. And, you know, they sign up for something. What they really don't understand is that when they sign, either as an adult or with their parents' permission or a parent's permission, they sign to potentially give their very lives for our country. That's what, when they sign that contract, you're not signing up to be a mechanic or a truck driver or a helicopter pilot or a legal assistant or an intel analyst or something like that. You're actually signing up to potentially give your life for the country. Right. That's if we have this attitude that our military is going to be used as really what it is, which is a blunt force. It can be precise at times, but as a blunt force to fight and win our nation's wars. Now, I think that when people come into the military and they go through a basic training and they get some additional skill training and they start to have that camaraderie as a team, they actually feel really good. And then all of a sudden we start to confuse them as to exactly why they're there, right?
Right.
And then we do stupid things. We do stupid things like we send them off to war, and then we give them things like the 35 flavors of ice cream on the battlefield, or Domino's delivers to your hooch, you know, over in Kandahar. I mean, these are ridiculous examples, and I'm telling you, but they're real. They're very real. I want men and women to join our military to get tough, to learn a skill, to learn about, you know, that their buddy on the left or the right is exactly why I want them to get in there and fight to the dickens, you know, to win. I want them to know that if something happens to them, we are going to be there, and we're going to help them. We're going to grab them. We're going to pull them off the battlefield if they're wounded. I mean, never leave a soldier behind. So, I mean, I want this attitude of strength and courage and commitment and dedication and discipline and sacrifice. That's what I want in our armed forces across the board. I don't care whether you're a sailor, an airman, Marine, or a soldier. I don't care whether you're serving, you know, in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, you know, Fort Hood, Texas, or you're serving overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan or Korea or anywhere. I want our military to be winners. I don't want them to be participators. I don't want them to be everybody gets a trophy kid. Okay? Not everybody gets a trophy. You two guys know, I know, life is not fair. It's not meant to be fair. So I'm not trying to, you know, for your audience, your listeners, you know, this is not about fairness. This is about service to the country, to protect the rights and the freedoms that we have. And I wish we did have you know, a draft at times. I mean, sometimes I think about it. Sometimes I'm not sure, but we have selective service. There's all this noise about we got to get, you know, women to start signing up for the selective service. I could argue either way, but the point is that I think that service to country is actually a good thing.
Right.
But we confuse people. We confuse the men and women who are serving. And so I think that confusion leads to other problems. And those other problems, become suicide as not just outside, the 22 a day number that we know of outside the military, but actually inside the military. That's the veterans number inside the military. And I've dealt with it. I've dealt with it in my units where I've had people who committed suicide. And it's one of the most, horrific things, especially when you're there, right? And you're brought into the barracks or wherever, and you see some kid who hung himself or shot himself or whatever. And the one thing that I've learned about this issue is that, and it is universal. It's universal that somebody else knows about it. Somebody else, when you start to investigate it for what they call a line of duty investigation, you learn that, this guy said this or this gal said that, or, and they were talking about this, and we saw them acting like this, and we're like, geez, why the hell didn't somebody say something? Right? Because, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, General Flynn. I agree with you, but at first I agree with you that it seems like the military has become more of an employment opportunity than it has a fighting force. But when I'm talking to a lot of our soldiers, a lot of them are afraid of being accused of something. They don't have faith in the investigation process, and there's how much politics is involved, because a lot of times it seems like the accusation is the evidence, and an accusation can kill your career. It's similar to like the organizations in the civilian.
Yeah, well, here's why. And you're right. I actually think that our leadership, and this is down to the platoon leader level, right? Company commander, where's the first level where somebody actually has some sort of, UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, as you would know, right? As a JAG. So, I mean, people that actually that treat others like that. And it's back to what I said early on, right? Mm-hmm. You have to look at everybody as a emotional, intellectual, mental, and spiritual being. Right. And I'm just glad that I was taught that as a child. And I like to think that I brought that into my leadership when I dealt with any issues in the military. And we do not have a lot of enlightened leaders, frankly. Sadly, we have good leaders in some cases, but you're going to find people, and you're going to find both the non-commissioned officers, and you're going to find officers who will treat people like, you got to toughen up, right? You got to toughen up. You don't have any problem. Don't tell me if you got mental problems, you need to go see a psychiatrist, and then we're going to start chaptering you out, right? And It's going to be bad on your record. And I mean, nonsense. Well, look at what we're dealing with. But that still happens. Yeah. That sort of psychosis, if you will, that mental attitude that you then carry with you, that mental weight that you carry with you in life, particularly as you get out. Now you're a veteran. It's very heavy. It's very heavy for people. And so what we should do is we should do better leadership training for the leaders that we do bring in to say, hey, look, this is not, this is about fighting and winning. Back to what the military is about. Okay. Right. And this is not an employment opportunity. This is not an employment opportunity. That's not what the military is about. There's plenty of jobs out there.
Right.
You join the military. You join the military for one purpose, to potentially, and I say potentially because if we do our jobs right as leaders, we're going to bring the majority home alive. But you are signing up to potentially give your life for your country, and you're doing it for reasons sometimes that you will never understand. You're doing it in places you'd rather not be, and you're doing it for people in many cases who don't even care that if you're there or not. You're doing it because you decided, because we're still all volunteer, right? Right. Until the day that we're directed to start signing up, men and women not in a volunteer way because we have to, because we're about to lose this country potentially. But that's what we have to get back to. And I actually think that, you know, the problems that we're dealing with, as you're highlighting, those problems that we're dealing with, we have to be very transparent and very above board. There's no secrets about this. This is a bad problem. And so we have to reach out and help them. And if you see somebody that has a problem, help them. Not because they served in the military, because they're a human being.
Right.
Because they're a human being.
You know, General, we're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you something before you get out. You said something that I really appreciated earlier, that you believe people need to work for what they're getting, not get the handout. I mean, we see what happened with the unemployment not long ago when we gave people just as much of a paycheck, or if, in many cases more, to not work. They didn't work and nobody could get any employees. I think the same thing happened to families when we started saying, hey, we'll give you government assistance, we'll give you welfare, we'll give you food stamps, but only if the father's not in the home. Now, a lot of these guys are fighting overseas, and we've got a government saying, hey, we're going to give you incentives if he's not here. He comes back home. Then he's fighting these wars at home. You talk about you want to make sure your guys are sharp and they're, you know, laser focused in on the mission. It's almost impossible for a guy that's fighting a war back home and then having to go over here. I mean, what's that like? I know you've probably seen it with some of your guys, but
a lot,
I mean,
actually, more than you I want, you know, more than I, and that's all ranks too, by the way. It's not just, you know, it doesn't just affect privates and corporals. It affects, you know, colonels and generals too.
Yeah.
You know, that's an impact of war. It's an impact of a lot of deployments. Here's what I'd say, I guess, on all this is that on the military side, with all of the constant deployments that we do go through, there has to be a real thoughtful means to ensure that that there's thought about reconciliation, and again, leadership. We do teach leadership in the military. I think that sometimes some of the leaders that we have are selfish, and not all, but I think that they can be selfish at times and think of themselves before they think of their men or their women that they have in their units. And I think that does impact, and the you know, the soldiers, and I'll use soldiers as a word for all the services, but as soldiers, they can see through that and they know. But I think that part of what, you know, what people have to really, when you're a young person and you're making decisions about, you know, if you're going to go into a relationship, you know, I just make sure that it's the right decision. Just make sure it's the right decision. It's not always the best decision. I mean, and I think the other thing from a government perspective, and looking back really since the 60s, the 1960s, this is really, I mean, there's been so much money. So if you have a broken family, if it's, you know, it's like an industry almost. It's become this industry.
Yeah.
It's a huge industry to cause a family to break up because, you know, it's, you know, again, as a Catholic, if you want to get married in a Catholic church, you got to go through like 6 months of, you know, all this preparation stuff that the Catholic Church requires, right? I mean, I did, and you know, even though my wife and I have known each other since we were 13, you know, I did just to, you know, but if I wanted to get a divorce, I could go down the road here to a divorce lawyer, probably pay, I don't know, today it might be $200. I remember days outside of the military bases where it was $25 you'd get a divorce.
Wow.
You know, $50 you'd get a divorce, and it was almost like, you know, and the other thing was then the incentives from the government for the people that were left behind, right? And it was almost like you were incentivized to have a broken relationship, and then the you know, the children and typically the mom who ends up with custody is then, you know, then becomes a ward of the state. And actually starts to, and the government loves a government can grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's been the problem with our government is they have these federal government programs that have just grown into these giant programs. You have all these nonprofits that are out there that are incentivized to basically be, they're the ward keepers, if you will, right?
Yeah.
So you guys know this, and you've talked about this, I think, in your show before. So you have this industry that's out there that incentivizes failure. It incentivizes failure in the family. And so I think the name of your show is really appropriate, because the most important word is really it's dad, but actually the more important word is talk, right? And because I think that what we have to do is we have to recognize in the conversations that we have with each other is that we can do much better in this nation. I kind of go around, when I go around to places, I always ask people, particularly like when I went down to the post office this morning talking to the folks down here that I've gotten to know. I was over at another place in my neighborhood close by that it's just small business people. I was like, how you guys doing these days for employees? And they're like, we don't have enough. We don't have enough people. Nobody wants. And I said, why do you think? And I know what the answer is, and they said, well, they're still getting too much money from the government, so why should I go to work? And that's a function of two things. It's a function of the government, willing to take our money. It's not the government's money, it's our money, and then pay somebody to do nothing, right? And the other part of that problem is us, is we accept it, right?
Yeah.
I could easily I could take my retirement, especially with all the persecution that I went through. I could take my retirement, which I worked my ass off for, right? And I could go and live a decent life, shut my mouth, and go away. And that's what a lot of people would like me to do. But I can't sit. Part of it is I can't sit still. The other part of it is I refuse to give up on the country, number one. And frankly, I refuse to give up on the people that are watching this show today. And whether it's a dad, whether it's a mom, whether it's a child, whether it's a veteran, whether it's I don't care if you're, purple with pink polka dots, it really does not matter to me. And I know that what matters to me is, are you willing to stand on your own 2 feet? And thank God that you have 2 feet to stand on, right? Thank God you have 2 feet to stand on, because I know people that do not have 2 feet to stand on, who are still standing up and doing something and taking responsibility in their lives. And maybe I'm a product of tough love in my own upbringing, because you couldn't complain in my house. You couldn't complain. Right. So, I sit around and, with everybody else when we're all having BS sessions, and, we'll joke and complain about this and that and that and that. But at the end of the day, it's like, I got to get up and I got to get out the door and I got to go do something. And nobody's going to, and I don't want to hand out. But I don't want to hand out. Now, is everybody in this category? Well, I'll tell you what, somebody didn't sprinkle fairy dust on me and poof, I was suddenly a general, right?
Right.
So, nobody took exams for me when I have 3 master's degrees, 3. Right. So it's not because I'm smart. It's because I worked, because I was taught as a child, be a lifelong learner and continue to get an education. So every opportunity I got, I took, and I worked hard. I would, and so anyway, none of us are perfect either. Okay. Right. None of us. And so, we have our imperfections, we have our faults, but what I would tell you is that, and your audience is that, what we have to do is you have to go find yourself. You really do. People have to go find themselves first. Like I said, the greatest faith is faith in oneself. If you have faith, right? The greatest faith is faith in oneself, and then you can start to express that faith in your own self in others. in relationships, in friendships, in work. You know, if you don't have faith in yourself, then you can't. I don't even know how the hell you can get out of bed every day.
Yeah,
I'm with you. A lot of people try to get that faith and love from someone else, and if they don't have it from themselves, it's never going to happen. It's
Never.
just,
yeah.
I
And
mean, you're doomed.
people are paralyzed by fear. And like you said, General, you could easily take your pension, keep your mouth shut, and go live a good life. But there's things worth fighting for. Our families are worth fighting for. I know a lot of people watching this right now, they've had their children taken by CPS just for allegations alone. You know, their marriages are gone. And when we have, you know, split families, we have a weaker country. Some things are worth fighting for. You know, you got the truth on your side. You have to stand up and stand in, because you're right. We don't want to lose our country. We don't want to lose the ability to be families and to be parents. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, and you know, in the persecution that I went through, because my children were older, they were adults, and they came after my family. They came after my, you know, my son. But I believe that if it were a different time and my children were younger, and I was in the situation that I was in, they probably would have come and taken my kids. They would have figured out some way to lie about something. And so, you know, when we talk about child protective services, we talk about families that are ripped apart by the government. You know, and then another day, I really would love to come on and just talk about, maybe I come on with my sister Mary, because you mentioned my sister Mary on the
I'd love that.
off the show, and we talk about, you know, child trafficking and human trafficking. I know a lot about that. My days in the intelligence business, working with the DEA, working with CPS, working with FBI, working with Border Patrol, working with ICE and other entities. I saw quite a bit of that, you know, and certainly where I could, from the collective sense of the organizations I was leading, help. I would help, and you know, because there's children are so, like, you know, they're just back and forth. Children don't know. They don't know anything. You know, they just do what they're told to do most of the time if they're taught right. But kids don't know, especially babies, right? But when I say babies, I'm talking about, you know, a 12-year-old down to a newborn, right? I mean, those are really babies to me. I mean, a teenager may have enough sense, you know, about themselves, and then you have a couple, you know what I'm saying? And I think your audience understands it. I mean, we're really talking about kids that are still trying to figure themselves out, right? Yeah. Like my mother. I mean, I'm 1 of 9. My mother used to tell us the most miserable time of life is as a teenager. I mean, imagine being told that by your mother, right? And we're like, man, I thought that, you know, and all of us always look back today when you're older, you go, man, I'd love to be a teenager again. No. You know, not, you know, at the time, I'm like, God, it was a really, really difficult time in my life because of pressure, incredible levels of pressure that your environment would put on you, particularly for young women. And so I think today, in the kinds of ways that our government operates, particularly our government, and the things that our government gets involved in, which they should not be, or they're involved in it too often. In this business about tearing families apart, and then the child trafficking side, to me is that to me is a place where there should be a, you know, like when we say there should be a special place in hell for people that are involved in child trafficking. That can't be stated any stronger, because there should be, in that special place in hell, you know, they need to feel it here on earth at times.
Let's do that show. I'm looking forward to that, General. I know we're right here at the end of the show. What do you got coming up next? Is there anything people can be looking out for? I know you've been doing some events. Where are you going to next?
Well, I'm actually heading to what's called a Take Back Georgia rally on Friday, Saturday, and part of Sunday. Take Back Georgia rally. Yeah, I'm going to be up there at least in Macon, I know for sure. Okay. I think we're going to be outside of Atlanta somewhere. I honestly don't, you know, off the top of my head, I know I'm there in a couple of big rallies, and I expect thousands of people to be at these rallies. We already know that there's thousands of people that are signed up, ready to show up. And it's basically a Take Back Georgia rally. And And it's actually, in this case, a specific case, I'm up there to support Vernon Jones, who's Vernon Jones running for governor up there. And that's sort of on the political side of me. And then on just sort of taking back America or saving America, we have these great, I call them health and freedom rallies. We have a couple of them coming up, one in Colorado Springs. We have another in Austin, Texas. And then, I'm just out and about in different events for different people to help my objective, my sort of overarching objective is to save America, because I think that we're in a time of crisis. Everybody knows it, everybody sees it, everybody feels it. There's the White House and the Washington D.C. crowd. They can try to ice skate as much as they want in front of these cameras and microphones, but this is a very, very difficult time for the country. I also have an organization called America's Future, and America's Future is, I'll throw out the website. It's americasfuture.net, www, but it's americasfuture.net. And people can learn what I'm about, even more so, what we support. We support these people that are being forced to have the shot, right? The vaccine, that don't want it. I mean, my body, my choice, my God, right? I mean, geez, what's going on here? So that's one area. We support things like education of the Constitution, and we support, in a big way, we've supported the audit out in Arizona, out in Maricopa, Arizona. We've put quite a bit of money behind that. Almost to the tune of about $1 million from our organization. And that's not my money. That's money that people give to us to support those kinds of causes. So americasfuture.net. And anyway, those are some of the things that I'm involved in. And I love doing that. And I can't sit still. I'm not going to give up. Yeah, this country means too much to me. I have spent too many years serving our country, and I know what sacrifice is in it. And frankly, my sacrifice is minuscule compared to those who gave the ultimate measure of devotion, right? The last true measure of devotion, where they died in the cause of freedom. So, for you and I, and for everybody listening.
All right. And General, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today, and keep doing what you're doing. I might come and see you there in Georgia.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll have somebody send you where we're going to be, because all I know is I show up.
Gotcha.
All right. God bless everybody, and thanks to your audience for listening and push me this, and I'll push that out, and maybe try to help you there a little bit to increase your audience, but also for your audience, these guys probably don't say things like donate too much, but donate. These guys do this based on donations and the kindness of contributions from the audience. So, put this at the front and put this at the end, but put this in there, because I know that's what it takes sometimes, that you got to get the donations out there and you got to get the contributions out of people. And so if I can help you out, you let me know how I can help you out.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you, General.
Thank you.
All right. God bless. See you.
Hey everybody, Eric Carroll here. Thank you for tuning in to another exciting episode of Dad Talk Today. While we fight for you, we would ask for you to please help fight for us. Like, subscribe to our channel, and ring that bell so you get notifications every time we go live. There's also super chats, patreon.com/dadtalktoday, and other ways you can support our channel. Thank you for being here, and we will see you next time.